welcome back. Today we're going to talk about revenue or how you get paid. It's really key to how your company grows and becomes profitable, but often it gets overlooked. So what we're talking about here is really what a customer will pay you, when, how, and under what terms. That's got to align first with what the customer needs and wants, but also with your cost structure and your stage of business, because your revenue model can and will evolve as your company grows. This might seem straightforward, but actually there's a lot of different revenue models. We're going to introduce a few of them here, and we'll go into more detail. So first off, there's recurrence. Mainly when we think of getting paid, it's what we call one-time fee for service. You do something, you get paid for it. But there are also recurring structures like a subscription, membership, razor and blade, things like that. Then for service businesses, a key question is, do you charge based on the time involved or do you charge by project? Another differentiator is third-party services. So there's agency or resale, where you resell a product or service that's actually made or provided by another company. And the inverse of that is subcontracting, where your product or service is sold by somebody else. Another structure is an advertising or sponsorship model, where a third party pays to access your customer base. There are also a couple models that we're not going to go into depth here. There's sliding scale or percentage. For example, designers often charge as a percentage of the overall project cost. You can also have success-based payments where you get paid based on the completion of milestones or hitting certain goals, and there's pay as you wish. But let's look at the four that we've outlined. So the first is one-time or recurring. This can be used for a product or a service. Most of us are familiar with one-time payments. I buy an apple, I get a haircut, I pay for it. In fact, most consumer products and services are paid for on a one-time basis because it's really easy to manage and understand. You know what you're getting, I know what I'm charging you for. The challenge is that after I've sold that apple today, tomorrow I've got to go out and sell another apple, do another haircut, or I've got no more money coming in. So this makes recurring revenues sound very attractive. Wouldn't it be nice to have money coming in regularly? But as a consumer, you understand that you're only going to pay on a recurring basis if you're getting ongoing value. So this is good for recurring services like subscriptions, regular product deliveries, memberships, things that happen or that you use over and over. The advantages for the business are it's a dependable source of revenues, and for the customer, it's predictable costs. They know what they're paying every month. The downside is that because it's a little more involved, the sales cycle might be a little longer, and there is some risk of churn. Because if I bought an apple from you today, I might not buy one tomorrow, but I might come back in a week. If you sell me an Apple subscription and 1 month I really don't like the apples, I may be done with you forever. So that's a risk, but really the main question here is, does the customer perceive that they're getting a recurring value that's worth paying for? Another question, particularly for service businesses, is whether you charge on a time basis, say by the hour or by the day. That's very clear to you. You know what you're getting paid for. It may be less certain to the customer. For example, if I'm designing a logo and I tell you it's going to cost $100 an hour, you may not know how long it takes me to design a logo. So when you get my bill, you might really question it. For me as the logo designer, the challenge of this is, as I get better at logo design, as I get faster, I'm actually going to get paid less for the same job unless I raise my rates. That makes it hard to scale my business. So the alternative is to charge by the project. I just tell you the logo is going to cost $250. You know what you're getting. And as I get faster, I can design more logos in a set amount of time so I can make more money. The downside is if I can't predict how long the project is going to take, I risk undercharging for my service. So the key question is, can I predict how long each project will take? If you're doing something uncertain like emergency computer repair, you don't know when you get that call, whether the customer just needs to reboot the computer or it's a huge disaster that's going to take a day to solve. So in that case, you're probably better off with time-based pricing, but this is something every service provider ought to give some thought to. We also mentioned third-party models. There's agency or resale, where one company provides their customers with a product or service that's actually developed by another company. If I have a marketing agency, perhaps I don't do a lot of video. So when my customer needs a video, I might use somebody else's services. That's resale. And then for the video provider, that would be subcontracting, or we might call it white labeling because they're selling under my brand name. This can be used for a product or a service anytime where one company controls the customer relationship and another company produces the good or service. Some advantages of this are I get to focus on doing just one thing really well. It's also a good way to test out a new product or try to get into a new market or reach a new customer type. Back to my example, I might develop my own video services over time once I've tested it out and seen that I have the demand for that video provider. Perhaps by selling through me, they're reaching a new customer base or validating their service in a way that will enable them to develop the service on their own. The disadvantages are, since I don't control the whole customer relationship, I have a risk of what we call disintermediation, which is where somebody gets between me and the customer or me and the product. That can squeeze my profits and make it hard to grow. So this can be a good way to get into a new market, introduce a new product, offer a niche service or product that I don't want to develop on my own. But over time, in many cases, I'm going to want to develop at least some aspects of the full customer relationship and product or service on my own. We also mentioned ad supported or sponsored. This can be used for a product or a service, anything that attracts a community that others want to reach. Sometimes the customer themselves doesn't pay. Google's a good example. You don't pay to use search, but advertisers pay to reach you as you're searching. On the other hand, if you go to a sporting event, you pay for that, and sponsors still want to reach that audience and will pay for that. So these are best for any business that has a definable, valuable audience that might be hard for advertisers or sponsors to otherwise reach. The benefits are it's an additional revenue stream. It might, if you choose, help subsidize your customer costs so you can lower your prices to customers, growing a bigger audience, which is even more valuable to advertisers. Also, advertisers and sponsors pay more per transaction and might sign longer term contracts, so it could be a more dependable revenue stream. On the other hand, this is something that is very hard to do when you're starting out. If somebody is paying for access to your audience, they're going to want to know that audience is there, that it's dependable, that it's engaged, and it's often hard to promise that until you've been in business for a while. You're also going to need to define and measure that audience so the advertiser knows that they're getting what they paid for. No matter how you decide to charge for your service, another consideration is timing. The earlier you get paid, the better, because that enables you to cover more of your costs sooner. So in many cases, it's worth thinking about whether you can charge for something before the product or service is delivered. In some cases, you might want to consider a combination. Perhaps there's a down payment and then an additional payment on certain milestones or completion. Another consideration for ongoing services like subscriptions or memberships is whether there's a different price structure at the beginning. In an upfront model, you charge more at the beginning, particularly if you're going to do a lot of customization, if there's a lot of work to be done with the customer, if you need to train their staff. That's a time commitment and you want to be paid for it. The opposite of upfront is a freemium or introductory pricing model, where you charge little or nothing at first with the idea that if the customer can get using your product, gets to like it, over time you can upsell them or they'll migrate to a higher price tier. As you can see from all of this, the key is getting the customer to pay for what they value. So we've already talked about recurring value and recurring payments, but there are other things customers value as well. If you're personalizing a product or customizing a service, that's going to take you time. That's an investment on your part. You should ask for, and customers will often pay for, that specialization. Another thing is predictability. Customers may value paying the same amount every month. If I do marketing services for you, some months are going to be busier than others, but it might be better for both of us if I charge you a set fee every month. You know what you're paying. I know the money's coming in. We don't have to have a long discussion about it, as long as I make sure that I've priced enough to cover my peak periods. Another one is urgency. If the customer has an urgent problem or needs to get moved up in my queue, that's going to have a cost to me in terms of shuffling around my other customers, responding to this particular demand, and I should get paid for that. Another thing is to think about all the costs that go into the full life cycle of your customer relationship. We have a worksheet on our site, and we'll put links in the show notes that helps you think through all of this. Think about the beginning of the relationship. Of course, there are supplies and out of pocket costs. Do you need special personnel? But also planning, customization, training. These are upfront costs that you need to get paid for. Then there are ongoing costs, the things that you need to support every transaction or every time you provide a service, and the logistical costs of doing all of that. There's also the sales cycle. This is something that really gets overlooked because people are so eager to sell. But if it takes you a long time to close a sale, that's an investment of time, and you need to get paid back either through a higher price or a longer term contract or both. Similarly, retention. The longer you keep the customer, the more profitable it is to you. So, is there a way you can structure your revenue that's going to incentivize retention? As you're doing this, one important cost is time. People are pretty good at understanding their out of pocket costs, but the thing that really hurts profitability time and again is that they forget to account for the time that things take. You don't want to do all of this in a vacuum. Look at the competition. You've probably already looked at how much they charge, but also how do they charge? Do they have a base price plus add-ons? Do they charge hourly or by the project? Do they charge upfront? Is there anything about their pricing you could learn from? You don't have to charge what your customers do, but it's a data point that you can learn from. So all of these revenue structures that we've talked about are things that you're going to want to work towards over time. But when you're starting out, you don't have that time. You don't have that luxury. You need revenues now. So if you have any installation, training, upfront fees, if you can pre-sell a product, if there's anything that you can do that gets you some revenues and starts to develop that customer relationship, that has value. You can resell somebody else's product. If you want to work on developing your product, you can see if somebody else will resell it for you. Think of ways you can get that customer relationship going and get some revenues coming in. And don't be afraid of consulting. That may not be your business longer term, but it's a way to develop a customer relationship and learn a whole lot and get paid as you're doing. However you start, the goal is to build your product knowledge, build that customer credibility. This is really the start of building a brand, of getting known for your skills. And from there, you can work towards that revenue structure that's going to be right for you long term. As we mentioned, we have a worksheet to help you figure this out. It's on our website. Here's a quick example of how it works for the dog walking example that we've used consistently. So here we've laid out the cost to us of providing the service. There's really a big upfront cost, not in terms of out of pocket. We don't need much in terms of supplies, but in getting to know the dog, the owner, the routine, all of that. On an ongoing basis, our cost again is mostly time that we spend walking the dog, but also the logistical time of getting there. The sales cycle is hopefully not that significant. We will have some admin and logistic costs, but again, timing is one of the biggest. So this makes us think, maybe we want to incentivize having customers that are clustered so they're easy to reach. Recurrence is going to be key to us. Given that upfront cost of getting to know the dog, we would really rather have a recurring customer. So on the next page, we can now look at what models work for us. Clearly, charging on a recurring basis is what we want to aim for. We also want to do project-based. Basically, a walk is a project. We may need to do some one-time sales, and we would really like to have some prepayment. The last page of the worksheet takes the highest ranking models and lets us look at them in terms of what we can feasibly do now. So charging on a recurring basis is really the goal, but it's a little harder to implement. So it may not be something that we can do. In the beginning, we may need to prioritize more one-time sales, more one-off walks than we would like to over time. Then there are other things that are valuable down the road. We might want to have a sponsor because we're reaching all these dog owners. But again, that's not something we can do at the beginning. So this helps us think about what we can do when. So that's this week's project. You can access the worksheet to think through your cost and revenue structures on our website. You can also see that dog walking example. As always, if you have questions or comments, please go to our website at paddlingfuriously.com/portal. And next week, we're going to really start to think about how to launch, about the prototype or MVP, an efficient way for you to launch, test your business, and get going. So we'll see you then.